The chill of the autumn wind cut through Jessica Hamilton's coat as she hurried out of the courthouse. It was a late afternoon in New York City, and after a long meeting with an international client, she was more than ready to head home. The weight of the contract she had just revised, written in French, still lingered in her mind. She found herself mentally reviewing every detail, even though her body craved rest. She was a legal linguist, after all, and such contracts were her domain. But today, her focus kept slipping. Perhaps it was the cold, or the exhaustion, or the thought that her day was almost over. She was just a few blocks from her apartment when something caught her eye. In the distance, a man was walking briskly down the street, his attention fixed on his phone as he paced hurriedly. Jessica couldn't help but notice how distracted he seemed, unaware of the world around him. His steps quickened, and the intensity of his movements made Jessica's heart skip a beat. He was heading straight toward the intersection, oblivious to the oncoming traffic. She squinted, the warning bells in her mind going off. A truck, moving too fast and without slowing down for the red light, sped toward him. Jessica didn't think. Instinct took over. Without a second thought, she ran toward the man, adrenaline surging through her veins. She reached him just in time to push him away from the truck's path. They both hit the pavement with a hard thud, the world spinning as the screeching sound of the truck's brakes filled her ears. She could feel the man's body collide with hers, propelling her off balance as she was thrown across the sidewalk. Pain shot through her as her body slid across the rough concrete. For a moment, everything seemed frozen, the deafening roar of the truck, the force of the wind as it rushed past, and the agony in her body. When the world finally stopped spinning, Jessica slowly lifted her head, trying to get her bearings. She looked at the man beside her. He was already sitting up, seemingly unharmed, though his face showed signs of confusion. "You're all right?" Jessica asked, her voice trembling. The man blinked, then turned toward her, his gaze intense. You saved me," he said quietly, his voice steady despite the close call. He stood up, dusting himself off as if the incident hadn't even happened. "That truck almost hit us," Jessica said, her voice sharp with a mix of shock and anger. "Do you have any idea how close that was?" The man simply smiled, a soft, almost knowing smile. "I'm aware," he said. "But I suppose you were in the right place at the right time." Jessica stood up shakily, still trying to catch her breath. "I didn't even know you," she muttered, trying to make sense of the situation. "Why are you so calm?" He raised an eyebrow, his calm demeanor never faltering. "Because I've dealt with worse," he replied. "But still, thank you." She didn't know what to say to that. The man, Marcus Deveraux, extended his hand to her, an unspoken thank you, but Jessica was still reeling from the chaos that had just unfolded. Marcus didn't seem to notice her hesitation. His hand was firm as he shook hers, his touch warm. "I owe you," he said. "And I don't forget debts." Jessica, still trying to make sense of what had just happened, nodded absent-mindedly. "It's fine," she said. "I just did what anyone would do." But Marcus didn't agree. He studied her with an intensity that made her heart race. "Not everyone would," he said, his voice dropping to a lower register. "You saved my life. And I won't forget it." The words seemed to hang in the air between them as they both stood on the sidewalk, the city bustling around them. Jessica looked around, suddenly aware of how ordinary this moment should have been. But to her surprise, it didn't feel ordinary at all. What had started as a simple act of saving a stranger's life was quickly turning into something far more significant than she could have ever expected. As they exchanged a few more words, Marcus seemed to be evaluating her, as if assessing something more than just her bravery. She wasn't sure what to make of it, but the unease in her stomach only grew as she felt an inexplicable connection to this man, someone who, despite his calm demeanor, seemed to be involved in something much larger than a simple near-miss on the street. Little did she know this moment, this seemingly insignificant encounter, would be the catalyst for a chain of events that would pull her into a world of business, betrayal and danger. And for Jessica Hamilton, life would never be the same. The next few days passed in a blur for Jessica. Despite the unexpected and bizarre encounter with Marcus, life seemed to settle back into its usual routine. She focused on her work, tried to push the images of the near collision from her mind, and continued with her legal consultations. But something about Marcus lingered in her thoughts. His calm, almost unsettling composure in the face of danger, his strange gratitude, and the way he seemed to study her all felt too significant to ignore. Then, on a rainy Wednesday afternoon, her phone buzzed on her desk. It was an unknown number. "Hello, Jessica Hamilton?" The voice on the other end was smooth, authoritative, and strangely familiar. It only took her a moment to recognize it. "Marcus?" she asked, a hint of surprise creeping into her voice. "Indeed. I hope I didn't catch you at a bad time." "No, not at all. How can I help you?" "I was hoping we could meet." "There's something I'd like to discuss," Marcus replied, his tone warm but enigmatic. Jessica hesitated for a moment. There was no reason to meet him, no professional reason at least. But curiosity gnawed at her. "Sure, when?" "How about tonight? I'll send a car for you." The invitation felt a little too sudden, and the thought of stepping into his world, a world she knew very little about, was unsettling. But her mind was already made up. The car arrived promptly at her door that evening. It was sleek and black, the kind of vehicle that screamed wealth and power. She took a deep breath as she climbed in, the driver giving her a polite nod before driving off into the evening traffic. The ride felt too quiet, and Jessica found herself glancing at her reflection in the darkened window, wondering what she was getting herself into. The car eventually stopped in front of a high-rise building. The glass and steel structure reflected the fading light of the sunset, and it stood tall among the other buildings, imposing and sophisticated. She was ushered into an elevator that ascended with a soft hum, and as the doors opened to Marcus's penthouse, she was met with an overwhelming sense of opulence. "Welcome," Marcus's voice greeted her, smooth as ever, as he stepped from behind a corner. He was impeccably dressed, as always, his presence commanding yet oddly comforting. She took in the space, floor-to-ceiling windows, tastefully decorated, and a view of the city that stretched out like a glowing sea of lights. It was the kind of place someone like Marcus would call home. "I wasn't sure what to expect," Jessica said, trying to break the tension. Marcus smiled, his eyes twinkling. "I don't expect people to understand my world easily. That's part of the reason I wanted to talk to you." Jessica nodded but kept silent as he led her to a plush sofa. The moment she sat down, the weight of the situation began to sink in. Marcus wasn't just a businessman, he was far more than that. But what exactly was he? "I'll get straight to the point," Marcus began, his tone shifting to something more serious. "You saved my life. And in this world, that means something. But more than that, I've been impressed by your quick thinking, your ability to assess situations. I can use someone like you." Jessica's brow furrowed. "Use? I'm not sure I understand what you mean." Marcus leaned forward, his expression becoming more focused. "I run a business. A very large one. I have connections that reach far beyond what most people can imagine. But as with any powerful organization, there are enemies, and there are traitors within. The last few months have been turbulent." He paused, as if weighing his words. "One of my own family members, Victor, has been plotting against me. I've uncovered evidence of his plans to overthrow me, and he's aligned himself with some very dangerous people. He's attempting to ruin everything I've built." Jessica swallowed. This wasn't just a business dispute, this was much darker. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts racing through her mind. "I need someone to help me uncover what Victor has been doing behind the scenes. Someone who can think critically, who can navigate through legal loopholes and financial webs." "You're the perfect person for this," Marcus said, his gaze unwavering. Jessica's heart raced. She'd walked into this meeting expecting some kind of professional proposition, but this was something else entirely. She knew she was being drawn into a world of power struggles, deceit, and danger. Yet, she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward Marcus. It was as if she was being offered a chance to be part of something larger than herself, something she couldn't resist. "I'll help you," Jessica said, her voice firm despite the uncertainty she felt. "But I need to know what I'm getting into. This is more than just business, isn't it?" Marcus stood up, his expression serious but not unkind. "It's more than business. It's survival. And trust me, Jessica, I don't plan on losing." The words hung in the air as Marcus turned and looked out the window at the city below. For a moment, Jessica felt as if she were standing at the edge of something immense, something she couldn't fully understand. But it was clear that, for better or worse, her life was about to change in ways she couldn't predict. The following days felt like a blur of tension and intrigue. Jessica spent more time at Marcus's penthouse than her own apartment. With each passing hour, she found herself getting deeper into the world of Marcus Deveraux. It wasn't just the luxurious surroundings that drew her in, it was the quiet intensity he exuded, the sense that he was constantly calculating, always thinking 3 steps ahead. But there was something else beneath the surface, something darker that Jessica could sense but couldn't yet fully understand. Marcus had given her access to a vast amount of information, financial records, business dealings, encrypted communications, all aimed at uncovering the full extent of Victor's betrayal. As a legal linguist, Jessica had the skills to parse through the dense language of contracts and financial statements. She spent hours every day poring over the documents, her sharp mind cutting through the confusion, connecting the dots, and finding the hidden threads that led to Victor's deceitful network. But as Jessica worked late into the night, she began to uncover more than she had bargained for. There was one company, a shadowy entity called Tertius Enterprises, that appeared frequently in Victor's dealings. The name meant nothing to her at first, but the more she dug, the more she realized that Tertius wasn't just a business, it was a front for something far more dangerous. The company had a vast network of shell corporations, and every time Jessica thought she had traced one line of financial activity, it twisted and split into more complicated webs. Late one night, as Jessica sat at Marcus's glass desk, the hum of the city outside, she found a particularly troubling document. It was an email thread between Victor and a man named Solomon Drake. The content of the emails made Jessica's blood run cold. They weren't just discussing a business takeover, they were planning something far more insidious. It was clear that Victor wasn't only after Marcus's position in the company, he was planning to take down the entire organization and sell its secrets to their competitors, most likely to one of the largest rival corporations in the industry. Jessica's fingers trembled as she clicked through the documents, piecing together Victor's plans. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a full-scale conspiracy. And in the middle of it all, Jessica had become an unwitting pawn, the one person who could expose everything, or worse, be caught in the crossfire. Just as she was about to print the document and bring it to Marcus, the door to the penthouse opened with a soft creak. Jessica looked up to see Marcus standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Found something interesting?" he asked, stepping into the room. Jessica's heart skipped a beat. She quickly minimized the document on her screen, unsure of how much Marcus knew. I think I've uncovered something big. Victor is involved with a company called Tertius Enterprises. They're connected to a series of illegal transactions. And he's been planning to sell us out to a competitor." Marcus's face didn't change. He walked slowly toward the desk, his eyes fixed on her. "I know about Tertius," he said quietly. "And I know about Solomon Drake. What you're seeing is just the surface. Victor is a threat, but he's not the only one." Jessica looked up at him, confusion in her eyes. "What do you mean?" Marcus paused, as if considering how much to reveal. "There are people in my inner circle who are involved in this as well. Victor may have started it, but there are others who have their hands in the pot. This is bigger than we thought, Jessica. Much bigger." Her stomach twisted with unease. "You're saying this isn't just a family feud? There are more people involved?" Marcus nodded. "Yes. And we can't trust anyone, not even the people who have been closest to me for years. This is a game of power, and right now, I'm losing. But I won't lose for long. Not with you on my side." Jessica felt a chill run down her spine. This was the moment when everything had changed. No longer was she just a bystander, someone who had accidentally stepped into Marcus's world. She was now a part of it, entangled in a dangerous game of deception, betrayal, and survival. And there was no turning back. Marcus's eyes met hers with a quiet intensity. "I know this isn't easy, but I need you to keep pushing. I need you to find everything you can about Victor and anyone else involved. And when the time comes, we'll make our move." She nodded, determination setting in. Despite the danger, despite the unknowns, there was no way she could back out now. She had a role to play in this, and she was going to play it well. The night grew darker as Marcus left her to her work, the weight of the situation hanging heavily between them. Jessica knew that the path ahead would be fraught with peril, but she also knew that the stakes were higher than ever. And in this world of ruthless power struggles, the only way out was to play the game to win. As the days passed, Jessica and Marcus continued their delicate dance of uncovering more secrets, all while the danger from within Marcus's own organization grew ever closer. Victor's betrayal was just the beginning, and Jessica was beginning to realize that there were far more enemies lurking in the shadows. The real question now was, who could she trust? The deeper Jessica dug, the more she realized the dangerous world Marcus had pulled her into. Every day, the stakes grew higher, and every new document she uncovered seemed to point toward a bigger conspiracy. It wasn't just Victor she had to worry about. There were powerful figures within Marcus's inner circle, people he had trusted for years, now aligned with those who sought to bring him down. Despite the mounting pressure, Jessica remained resolute. She worked tirelessly, her days and nights blending together as she sifted through financial statements, encrypted emails, and boardroom meetings that seemed to hold the answers she needed. Marcus was always there, watching over her as she deciphered clues and pieced together the puzzle. One evening, as the rain poured outside the penthouse, Jessica sat hunched over her desk, a stack of papers in front of her. The weight of her findings pressed heavily on her chest. She had finally found something crucial, an email exchange between Marcus's trusted CFO and a mysterious third party. The CFO, Alexander Frost, had been funneling large sums of money into an offshore account tied to Victor's dealings with Tertius Enterprises. The scale of the betrayal was staggering. Her heart pounded in her chest. This wasn't just about Victor anymore. It seemed Marcus's entire empire was being undermined from within. As Jessica was about to call Marcus and reveal her findings, the lights in the penthouse flickered. She frowned, glancing around the room. The storm outside was fierce, but the power shouldn't have been affected. She stood up from her chair, the hairs on the back of her neck standing up. Something felt off. Her phone buzzed, the screen lighting up with a message from an unknown number. "You're getting too close. Stop digging, or you'll regret it." A chill ran down her spine. She had expected the threats, of course, but this one felt different. Whoever was behind it had access to her, knew exactly where she was, and what she was doing. She immediately locked her computer and headed for the door, her instincts telling her that she wasn't safe anymore. Just as she reached the hallway, she heard the faint sound of footsteps behind her. She turned, but it was too late. A man in a black suit emerged from the shadows. His face was partially obscured by a mask, but his presence was unmistakable. The air in the hallway grew thick with tension. Jessica froze, her heart racing. The man spoke with a low, commanding voice. "Jessica Hamilton, I presume? You've been getting too comfortable in Marcus's world. I suggest you stop while you can." Her breath caught in her throat. "Who are you?" she asked, trying to steady her voice, though fear gripped her. The man smiled, though it was devoid of warmth. "You don't need to know my name. But I'm here to make sure you don't interfere any further. Marcus has already made his choices, and so have you. But if you keep digging, there will be consequences." Jessica's mind raced. She needed to get out of there, but the man blocked her path. Every instinct told her to run, to fight back, but she had no idea who this person was, or how many more like him were out there. Her only option was to stall, buy herself some time. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, her voice shaking but determined. "You won't intimidate me into backing down." The man's smile widened, but there was no humor in it. "You should be," he said, his voice laced with malice. "This is a dangerous game you're playing. And you don't have the power to win it." Before she could respond, the man made a subtle motion, and two other figures appeared from the shadows, closing in on her. Panic surged in her chest, but she knew she couldn't back down. This wasn't just a warning, it was a direct threat to her life. But then, just as the situation seemed to be spiraling out of control, a familiar voice broke through the tension. "Let her go." It was Marcus. He stood at the other end of the hallway, his presence commanding and unmistakable. The man in the mask turned toward him, his demeanor unchanged. "I thought I made it clear, Marcus. Your little protégé is getting too close. It's time to end this." Marcus's gaze was cold as he stepped forward. "You've overplayed your hand," he said, his voice low and controlled. "And you've made a mistake. Let her go. Now." For a brief moment, the two men stared each other down, the tension so thick it was almost suffocating. The masked man hesitated, then nodded to his associates. Slowly, they backed off, but Jessica could tell the threat wasn't over. As they disappeared into the shadows, Marcus stepped forward and placed a hand on Jessica's shoulder. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft, but his eyes betrayed the weight of the situation. Jessica nodded, though she couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in her chest. Who were they? What's going on, Marcus? Marcus looked at her with a mixture of concern and grim determination. They're part of the network that's been working against us. People I trusted, people who were supposed to be loyal. The stakes are higher than you realize, Jessica. You're in more danger than ever. The gravity of Marcus's words sank in. She wasn't just helping him uncover a betrayal anymore. She was now a target herself. As Marcus led her back to the safety of his penthouse, Jessica knew that the game had changed. She was no longer just a bystander in this high-stakes world of power and deceit. She had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. But one thing was certain: whatever it took, she was going to make sure Victor and his conspirators were exposed, no matter the cost. The following days were filled with a sense of urgency. Marcus and Jessica worked around the clock, analyzing every piece of evidence they had collected. But as the walls seemed to close in on them, the magnitude of the conspiracy they were up against became painfully clear. Victor had allies everywhere, within Marcus's own organization and beyond. The deeper Jessica dug, the more she realized that the people she had thought she could trust were all part of a network that had been quietly plotting Marcus's downfall. Despite the danger, Jessica couldn't back away. She had already gone too far, and in a strange way, she felt more connected to Marcus than ever before. They were in this together, and there was no going back now. Late one night, after hours of sifting through more documents, Marcus finally brought a breakthrough to the table. "Jessica, look at this," he said, his voice tense as he placed a series of files on the table. "I've been tracking the money Victor's been funneling through Tertius Enterprises, but I found something more. A meeting. A key meeting between Victor and someone I never thought I'd see again." Jessica leaned forward, her eyes scanning the documents. "Who?" she asked, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. "Solomon Drake," Marcus said, his voice heavy with contempt. "The same man I thought I had cut ties with years ago. He's the one orchestrating everything behind the scenes." Jessica stared at the name in disbelief. Solomon Drake had been one of Marcus's former allies, someone he had trusted implicitly. The revelation that he was behind the betrayal was as shocking as it was dangerous. "I thought Drake was out of the picture," Jessica muttered. "What's his connection to Victor?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "Drake's been using Victor as a pawn. He's the one who set everything in motion, convinced Victor that he could take me down. And now they've got an entire operation set up to steal everything we've built." Jessica absorbed the information, trying to piece together what it meant. "So what now?" she asked, her voice steady. "We've got the evidence. It's time to expose them." Marcus's eyes darkened. "It's not that simple. If we go public with this, it'll ruin everything. It'll destroy my empire, and everyone involved will be exposed. Victor, Drake, and anyone who's worked with them will have nowhere to hide. But they won't go down without a fight." Jessica's mind raced. They had everything they needed to bring down Victor and his conspirators, but they were facing a dangerous enemy who wouldn't hesitate to strike back. She realized that this was no longer just about legal battles or business takeovers. It was a war. "How do we stop them?" she asked. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in thought. "We need to hit them where it hurts. We need to trap them in a way they can't escape. But we can't do it the traditional way. It's too risky." Jessica felt a rush of determination. "What if we set a trap? We know Drake's operation inside out. We can use the evidence against them and get them to reveal their entire network." Marcus's eyes glinted with approval. "That's exactly what I had in mind. We'll lure them into a position where they have no choice but to show their cards. But it won't be easy. It'll take everything we've got." Over the next few days, Jessica and Marcus set their plan into motion. They carefully crafted a scenario that would make the conspirators believe they were in control. They used the false information to draw Drake and Victor into a meeting, where they would be exposed. The trap was set. The night of the meeting arrived. Jessica stood by Marcus's side, feeling the weight of the moment. They had carefully orchestrated every detail, every step of the plan. As they walked into the dimly lit room, Jessica felt the tension in the air. It was now or never. Victor and Drake were already there, seated at a table, their faces dark with suspicion. Marcus and Jessica took their seats across from them. "Glad you could make it," Marcus said, his voice steady but cold. I trust you've been enjoying the view from the top." Victor sneered, his eyes scanning the room. "You think you can outsmart me, Marcus? It's already too late. You've already lost." Drake, sitting beside Victor, didn't say anything. His eyes were calculating, watching every move. Jessica leaned forward, her voice calm but unwavering. "Actually, Victor, it's you who's lost. You've been played. And we have everything we need to bring you down." Victor's face twisted in anger, but before he could respond, Marcus pulled out a stack of documents, placing them on the table. "These are your financial transactions, Victor. Every deal you made with Tertius Enterprises. And these," he said, holding up another set of papers, "are the communications between you and Solomon Drake. We have everything." For a moment, there was silence. Victor's expression darkened, but he didn't move. Drake, however, seemed to realize that the game was up. "Don't be so quick to think you've won," Drake said with a cold laugh. "You have no idea what you're up against. The people I work with, you'll never get to them." Marcus smiled grimly. "It's already over, Solomon. We've exposed you. The authorities will take care of the rest." Victor's face turned pale as he realized the gravity of the situation. He stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor, but Marcus's men, who had been waiting outside, rushed in and restrained him. Drake, seeing his partner's capture, stood and took a step back. "You may have won this round, but it won't be the last time we meet," he said, his voice laced with venom. Marcus didn't flinch. "We'll see about that." As the authorities arrived and took Victor and Drake into custody, Jessica let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. There were still enemies out there, waiting for the right moment to strike. But for the first time in a long while, Jessica felt like she had gained control. She had stepped into Marcus's world and helped bring down the people who tried to destroy it. And no matter what came next, she was ready. The game had only just begun.